For nearly a decade, he was untouchable. 8 consecutive Mr. Olympia titles, a physique so balanced and so commanding that judges awarded him perfect scores. He retired undefeated at 31, walked off the stage on his own terms, and never returned to competition. Arnold Schwarzenegger held the record before him. Lee Haney broke it. In early 2026, a rumor spread across the internet that the 8-time champion had died. His children posted an appeal online. Their father, the man who had once appeared carved from granite, needed a kidney, a stranger's kidney, and he was running out of time. How does the most dominant bodybuilder of his generation arrive at this point? The answer involves a runaway goat, a hereditary disease he carried for nearly 3 decades without disclosing it, a wife who persuaded him not to retire early, and a quiet faith that sustains him now. This is the side of Lee Haney that the magazines did not put on their covers. He was born on November 11, 1959 in Spartanburg, South Carolina, a small southern town where ambition had to be built from nothing. His father drove a truck. His mother kept the house. There were 5 children in the home, and Lee was the youngest. There was no gym membership and no personal trainer. There was a boy who ran to the magazine rack every time his parents took him to the grocery store, looking for the latest issue with Arnold Schwarzenegger or Robbie Robinson on the cover. He did not only admire those men, he wanted to become them. When he was 11, he asked his parents for a set of weights for Christmas. They put the money together. The weights came with a Charles Atlas mail-order course inside the box. For most children, that gift would have gathered dust in a basement by February. For Lee, it became a discipline he followed daily. He moved the bench and the bar into the family garage and trained until his hands bled. He read every book on nutrition he could find. By high school, he was larger than the football players on his own team, and he was outworking all of them. None of his classmates knew they were watching the early training sessions of a man who would, less than a decade later, hold the most prestigious title in the sport. The gift that started it all was sitting under a Christmas tree in a truck driver's home in South Carolina. That detail indicates where his drive came from. In 1984, at the age of 24, Lee Haney walked onto the Mr. Olympia stage and won. He became the youngest Mr. Olympia champion in the sport's history, defeating the reigning title holder, Samir Bannout. What the bodybuilding world was witnessing was not a one-off result. It was the beginning of a run that would reshape the sport. Though winning at 24 came with a problem that the trophy ceremonies did not show. He had reached the top of the sport before most professionals had finished their climb, which meant that from that point forward, each year became a matter of holding the position rather than building toward it. Haney later described the pressure in unusually direct terms. He compared the situation to gladiators in a Roman arena. He said competitors fought to the death because that was how they were wired, that they were not normal people, and that they did things to their bodies that normal people would never do. In private, he described it as a constant mental battle. The confidence that appeared in magazine spreads was managed rather than effortless, and the cost of managing it was greater than the public understood. The wins continued through 1985, 86, and 87. In 1986, he received 2 perfect scores from the judges, a level of agreement the sport rarely produced. He also introduced a phrase that would outlast his competitive career: stimulate, not annihilate. The idea behind it was that growth did not require destroying the body. Training intelligently, eating cleanly, and building a physique that could be sustained over time became both his method and his identity, and it separated him from competitors who were wearing themselves down trying to match him. In later interviews, Haney stated something that few champions in the sport have said publicly. He did not love bodybuilding in the way audiences assumed. He approached it as a job and as a craft to be mastered rather than a passion. He showed up, completed the work, and went home. The man who appeared built for the stage described himself in his own assessment as a disciplined professional doing his job. That detachment may explain how he sustained his position for so long. It may also explain why he began considering retirement earlier than most expected. By 1990, he was close to walking away, and only one person in his life kept him from doing so sooner. After his 7th Mr. Olympia title in 1990, Lee Haney was ready to retire. He had matched Arnold Schwarzenegger's all-time record, and he had nothing left to prove. The mental cost of staying on top, the pressure, the diets, the obsessive preparation had reached a point where he wanted out. He went home and told his wife Shirley it was over. She told him to think again. She knew what he didn't want to admit out loud, that walking away tied with Arnold would haunt him, and that breaking the record was a chance no one else in history had ever been close enough to grab. She convinced him to come back for one more year, one more camp, one more Olympia. He listened. In 1991, he stepped on stage and did it. 8 in a row, a number no bodybuilder in the world had ever achieved. He won, exhaled, and walked off for good. He was 31 years old. The rumors started almost immediately. Dorian Yates, the man who would inherit the Mr. Olympia throne, suggested in interviews years later that Haney had seen something at the 1991 contest, saw Yates rising, saw what was coming, and decided to retire undefeated rather than risk falling. Haney has always denied this. His version is simpler. He had broken the record, his body was healthy, his family was growing, and there was nothing left to chase. He once put it bluntly, when you're on top, there's nowhere else to go but down. So he left. But the body he had built so carefully was already carrying a secret. A genetic timer was ticking inside him, and even he didn't know it yet. The first warning would come from an unlikely source. The story of how Lee Haney discovered his disease has an unusual beginning. Years after his retirement, he was on his property when one of his goats got loose. He chased it down, and when he caught the animal and tried to wrestle it back into the pen, the goat kicked him hard in the abdomen. He got up, dusted himself off, and went on with his day. He didn't think much of it. Within hours, there was blood in his urine. He went to the doctor, who ran tests. The doctor told him there was a cyst on his kidney and explained that someone in Haney's family must have had congenital polycystic kidney disease, a hereditary condition where cysts gradually develop and slowly destroy kidney function over years or decades. There was no cure, only management. Eventually, the doctor said he would need a transplant. Haney received that warning roughly 26 years before the public ever heard about it. For more than 2.5 decades, he kept it almost entirely to himself. He leaned on the same philosophy that had built his physique: disciplined nutrition, careful exercise, and a refusal to abuse his body the way other bodybuilders did. He delayed the disease longer than his doctors thought possible. He outran it the same way he had outrun every challenger on the Olympia stage. But genetics doesn't play fair, and eventually the timer ran out. In early 2026, a rumor began spreading across social media that Lee Haney had died. The posts multiplied faster than anyone could correct them. Fans flooded comment sections in mourning, tributes were written. For a brief window, much of the bodybuilding world believed it had lost one of its greatest icons. Then his children stepped in. His son Joshua and his daughter Olympia, named after the title their father had won 8 times, posted a coordinated message on Instagram. Their father was alive, but he needed help. The kidney his doctors had warned him about 26 years earlier was finally failing. The post explained that through faith, nutrition, and exercise, he had managed to delay a transplant for far longer than expected. Now he was searching for a living donor. A link and a QR code went out to anyone willing to be tested. Comments poured in. Strangers offered up their organs. One commenter pointed out that nobody seemed to be asking what his blood type even was. Another wrote that they would give him a kidney without hesitation. A day later, Haney himself broke his silence. He posted a message thanking his fans for their prayers, and addressed the death rumors directly with a flash of the humor that had always defined him. He wrote that he was alive, well, and fully functional, and that he was, in his words, not needed in heaven at the time. He told his followers his faith in God had always been his superpower. He said he was approaching the situation proactively, not fearfully, and then he went back to waiting. Because no matter how many strangers offer their organs online, finding a viable, medically compatible donor is a process that takes time most patients don't have. Once news of his condition went public, the assumptions began. Steroids, people said. It had to be steroids. Bodybuilders use them. Kidneys fail, and the math seemed obvious to anyone scrolling through a comment section. Haney watched the speculation pile up and decided he wasn't going to let it stand. He addressed it directly in interviews. He said he understood why people made the assumption, because in his industry it was often a fair one. But in his case, it was wrong. His condition was polycystic kidney disease, and it was hereditary. Someone in his family line had passed it to him through DNA, not through anything he had injected. He pointed to his blood work as evidence of the lifestyle he had actually lived. He had built his career on the principle of stimulating the body rather than destroying it. He had avoided the off-season binges on red meat and processed food that he believed were quietly killing other competitors. He talked about heart disease in the bodybuilding world. He talked about young athletes dying before 50 because they thought they could outrun their habits forever. He told reporters that his arteries were clean, his heart was strong, and his kidney was failing for reasons that had nothing to do with how he had trained. The pushback mattered to him for a specific reason. After his retirement, Haney had built a second career around teaching young people how to live healthier lives. President Bill Clinton had appointed him chairman of the President's Council on Physical Fitness and Sports, a role he held from 1999 to 2002. He hosted a Christian fitness program called Totalee Fit on the Trinity Broadcasting Network. He ran a wellness business focused on men over 50. If the public walked away believing his kidney failure was self-inflicted, it would undercut everything he had spent 30 years preaching. So he refused to let that narrative win. The disease was inherited, the legacy was earned, and he wanted both facts on the record. In 2014, Lee was inducted into the International Sports Hall of Fame. By every measurable standard, he had become the elder statesman of his sport. Ronnie Coleman tied his record of 8 Mr. Olympia titles in 2005, but the two men became close friends rather than rivals. Haney has spoken openly about the pain of watching Coleman struggle through years of surgeries and chronic injuries, stating that it hurts him to see former competitors living with that kind of damage. Wackenpimmed, and he has used those moments to argue, publicly and repeatedly, that the modern sport has lost its way. He has stated that today's athletes are sacrificing health for size, that coaches who never competed themselves are pushing protocols that wreck bodies, and that someone needs to say the quiet part out loud before more legends end up broken. Now, that someone is him, the man who built his entire philosophy around protecting the body, the man who outlasted the disease in his DNA for nearly 3 decades, is now asking the world for a piece of someone else's kidney. He continues to mentor younger athletes. He continues to post on social media. By all accounts, he remains physically stable and mentally at peace. He told one interviewer that if he gets a transplant, that will be wonderful, and if he doesn't, he has already lived an amazing life. He said it with the calm of a man who has made peace with the idea that the second outcome is possible. The most dominant bodybuilder of his era, a man whose physique is still studied by competitors 4 decades later, is now defined less by what his body can do than by what is happening inside it. The 8 Sandow trophies sit somewhere in a house in Atlanta. The records are in the books. The footage is on YouTube. None of it can give him a kidney. The sport that made him famous celebrates the illusion of indestructibility. Haney has spent his entire post-retirement life trying to dismantle that illusion. He has told anyone who would listen that the body is borrowed, that genetics has a vote, and that no amount of muscle outruns biology forever. He is now living that lesson in front of millions of people, and he is doing it with a grace that has caught even his critics off guard. Note, a truck driver's son from Spartanburg became Mr. Olympia 8 times. Then he walked away. Then he watched his own body keep a promise it had made him in a doctor's office 26 years earlier. Through all of it, he has continued to say the same thing, that he is not afraid, that he is not finished, and that he is for now not needed in heaven. Whether a donor comes through or not, that may end up being the most significant thing he ever built. Not the muscle, not the records, the peace.